knocked on my door, or knocked on our door, and the back door. It was quite early in the morning. Earl had just gone to school. And he said, Ilene, are you pregnant? And I was kind of taken back, and I was a little bit put out at him asking me something like that.
Why didn't you tell him?
And so I answered him right back, smart like, no, I'm not pregnant. And he says, good. You're the next president of the MIA. He says, show up when you come down to church Sunday. We'll take care of the setting apart and sustaining you after sacrament meeting. Well, there's a position I really enjoy, and I held it until about the fall of 1934, and then I said, when I saw the bishop, I said, Bishop, you better find somebody else that isn't pregnant, because I'm going to have a baby in December. So they released me. And Gwenny was born 15th of December, 1934.
Okay, now tell us about being president.
About being president?
Uh-huh. Because I remember going up to the Dell with you.
Oh, well, you were, well, that's right. You would be able to go to the Dell with me.
Now, you took us up to the Dell with you as little kids. We went up there quite a bit.
I was president of the Mutual in the Second War, too, after we moved back down to Pleasant Grove. I don't remember whether you were, but I know I took you in Early. We'd have an outing. What do they call it? Our days at the Dale?
Ward days. Mm-hmm.
Our days at the Dale, but we'd go up and stay for 2 or 3 days. And we'd take the teachers were the cooks, and we were also responsible for the kids. I don't ever remember having very much help and supervision up there. Only just the teachers that could go. I always took Ruth and Early with me, and Pearl would just be a baby then. I'd have to just take her. She wasn't very old. I'd have to just take her, and somebody would pretty well have to watch her in the Dale. But do you remember when you went up on the barrel roll-off and I wasn't able to chase you?
No. I remember going up on the bear roll-off.
Well,
we always had to climb the bear roll-off, but I don't. I was too little to go, apparently, huh?
No, you wanted to go where all the bigger kids went, and
sure, boy.
And I remember once chasing you quite a little ways up the hillside, trying to catch up with you, because I didn't want you to go on that hike that the kids went on. But I had to follow you halfway up the trail before I caught up with you.
Well, that wasn't the first time you chased me.
No, that wasn't the first time.
You skipped some of those fun things when we were little kids. Maybe you better go back and pick some of them up.
Well, okay. Clip it off for me.
I remember you chasing me. Or I don't remember, but you told me about you chasing me down Provo.
No, when we were living in Pleasant, when Earl was, we were living in Pleasant Grove. We were still downtown, and it's in the strawberry days, and you were just big enough that you'd be about two and a half or 3 years old. But you were just big enough that you could walk between anyone's legs. And one strawberry day, when there's, I tried to keep up with you, and you got away from me. And you went dashing down the street, and waving in and out between people's legs. I don't know how come, I can't figure out yet how come you could get by between their legs.
I don't either.
And not trip somebody down. But you did, and you got through. You took me a whole block, a full block there by the school, trying to catch up with you, and you going down between people's legs. And me calling at you, Ruth, come back here, Ruth, come back here.
I always thought that was in Provo.
No, that was down here in the Strawberry.
Oh, my.
Mm-hmm. Flip it off a minute. I have to tell you about when Pearl was born. We were laughing about having all of my babies born at Mother's, and she was born in June. She was born 20th of June, 1931, and Mother lived over there in the old bee place then. It was kind of a rundown, more rundown than the other places she lived in. But she had she had her place full of boarders, and she was gonna take care of me. And around it was in the evening when I started in labor. Well, I started in labor in the afternoon, but the doctor always told me to go home and take a full bottle of castor oil.
Oh, yuck.
Yeah, a big bottle like this. And so I went home and took the castor oil, and I started in pretty heavy labor while they were still having supper. Mother didn't have time to be around with me when they had supper, and she didn't want me having a baby with all those men around there. So she says, go out on the back porch and sit there and see if you can wait until we get things cleared up and we get the guys out of here. So I sat out there on that back porch.
Oh my gosh.
And counted the time, and I knew that the time was getting down pretty good. And Mother came out and she says, how are you? And I said, I don't think I can hold out much longer. So she called the doctor and said, come on in the house. And I think Pearlie was born about 7:30. But I didn't have very many very much time from the time she called the doctor till it was all over with. But I just kind of wanted you to.
She got the dishes done knowing the men cleared out of there, huh?
Yeah. But what I wanted to tell you about Pearlie, I wanted to say how good my mother was to me. And she took care of me through Early and Ruth and Pearl. And if I was ever sick or anything, I'd go to Mother's and stay there and stay 2 or 3 days. One of the kids got sick that I couldn't handle, I'd go over to Mother's. So when Pearl was born, Earl went to summer school. He went down to Seattle. He studied music with Hollis Dan. And it was a real good opportunity. It was when we felt like he couldn't pass up. So Mother had she had Early and Ruth to take care of without any help from Earl. So he was only, Pearlie was only 3 days old when he left. And he stayed 6 weeks, so she was pretty good. She was pretty well over her little tiny baby stage. But Pearlie had the prettiest black hair, and she had a whole head of black hair. And she was a pretty little thing. And Pap he was just bragging all the time he was gone about what a beautiful baby he had and how much hair she had. So when he came home, I was just getting around. I didn't feel very much like walking around. Well, they when they kept you in bed so long, it made you weak.
Mm-hmm.
And so when Pat pulled up and he had several people that he'd been to this convention with and been driving, he came dashing in the house, wanted to get his baby and take her out and show him. And I had a little white ruffled hood on her. And he said, he wondered what on earth I had that hood on. So he just took it and untied the strings and pulled it off to show these people her beautiful hair on. And she lost all of that baby hair.
She was bald, huh?
Yeah. He was pretty well upset that she lost all that pretty baby hair. But I wanted to tell you about how Pearl got her name. See, my mother was Effie Pearl Dalton Prince. Effie Pearl Dalton, we always called her. You kids always called her EPDP.
Mm-hmm.
But,
we called her, not really, but we kidded about it.
You kidded about it, yeah.
Uh-huh.
But when Pearlie was about 3 days old, Mother came in and was taking care of me and the baby. And I said, Mother, how would you like me to name the baby for you? And I can still remember that pretty smile. She just smiled all over. And it only lasted for a minute, but you could see she was just real pleased. And she said, then she said, oh no, I wouldn't want you to do anything like that. Well, I made up my mind now that Pearl would be named for Mother. So when Earl got home and we were talking things over, I said, I want to name the baby for my mother. And Grandma Beck's name was Lula Hannah. And Grandma Atwood always called her Lula Hanner. Hanner.
Hanner.
Yeah, Lula Hanner. And Earl thought if I was going to name her for Mother, I ought to name her for his mother too. And I said, no, I want her named just for Mother. And you were named for your father. Well, he kind of thought there'd be feelings if I just named her for Mother. And he fiddled around with Lula Pearl and Lula Hannah, or Pearl Hannah, and names like that. But we never, any of us wanted that. So he started looking for names that would go with Pearl. And I said, name her Pearl Dalton. And he said, no. I like the name of Laree. And I said, Laree don't mean anything. Who's Laree? Oh, it's just a pretty name. And I said, no, I don't like that. And as we left to go to church to name the baby, I said, now you're going to name her you're going to name her Pearl Dalton. He didn't answer me. And so I listened right carefully, because felt like there maybe it'd be something. And I listened right carefully to see what name he gave her when he stood up to bless her. And he said, Pearl Laree Beck. Well, I felt badly about it, because really did want her named for Mother, because all of the things she'd done for us and for me, I just felt like if that would make her feel good, that would be the nicest thing I can do. But and Pearl compensated with it, and Mother compensated with Pearl, because I believe she showed Pearlie a little favors over the rest of you kids.
Oh, definitely.
And
Pearl could never do anything wrong.
no, I'm sure Pearl was Mother's favorite, and she always fixed her pretty dresses. She got her pretty hair back, though. She got a beautiful head of black hair
Well,
back.
she always made all of us pretty dresses.
Yes, Mother kept, even though she had borders and all of the work she had to do, she made all of you kids just beautiful clothes.
Yeah.
And then after she got other grandkids, she made them too. But when she was, when you got started to school, she used to make sure that you had a different dress for each day of school.
I remember that.
And they were nice dresses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they were cute.
Uh-huh. And so then I guess it just as well finishing this, her being named for Mother. When
Yeah, how about my name? Go ahead with what you got.
when Mother, after when she was 65, she didn't feel too well, and she pretty well, she used to go like this, and she'd say, my stomach hurts, and she went around quite a little bit holding her stomach. So after the kids were all married, and she was 65, she decided to break up housekeeping. And that was when we were in our new home then. I was 45, about 43, and 1943. And she came to my place. They brought most of her furniture over to our place. Her dining room table and her china cabinet and her dining room chairs.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember. That's mainly what I remember.
Yeah, I remember the dining room table and chairs.
And her dishes and things like that the kids didn't want when she divided them up. But Mother died in 1946, and I was working down at Geneva then. So Pearl and Ruth was working some down at the cannery, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And Pearl, I told Pearlie I'd pay her if she'd take care of Mother. And she said, no, you don't need to pay me. I'd be glad. I'd like to take care of Grandma. So she took care of Mother, and Mother called her head nurse. And she got to the point where she didn't want anyone to do anything for her but Pearl. And so when she died, she had a little bit of extra money set aside that she wanted Pearl to have. So it kind of compensated out for her to be named for Mother, and it was a real good thing. I always felt good about her being named for. Now Ruth wanted me to. Well,
Yeah, now how about my name?
No, I'm not going to say.
Yes, you are.
No.
Then I will.
Huh? Well, when Ruth.
I don't remember the whole story of it. All I remember is, yeah.
When Ruth was blessed, I don't know how. we went over a bunch of names, or some names, and Earl wanted her named Ruth. And I didn't think that Ruth was a pretty name then, because, you want me to say this?
Huh? You had a cow.
Yeah, we had a cow that was tamer than the others, and she's the one that Wally and I used to put the saddle on and ride.
You named her Ruth.
And so when he wanted to name Ruth, I said, you can't do that, Earl. We've got an old cow named, we always had an old cow named Ruth. And he says, well, I think Ruth's the prettiest name in the Bible. And so we started to look at it a little different way. So she was named Ruth Eileen.
Now, come on, you either had your choice of Ruth or after his girlfriend.
Oh, no, he never wanted to name her Anna.
Well, there was one girlfriend that you always debated about, whether it was Ruth or after this girlfriend.
No, I wanted your name Beatrice. But I can't tell you the reason I wanted that name. But it was a special, sacred reason for me. And nobody liked that name.
Mm.
And that's the reason that...
You mean all these years we accused Happy of wanting to name me after the girlfriend or the cow, and I got the cow isn't right?
Well, it wasn't a girlfriend. He just said I had one name. All through with all of our kids, we never agreed 100% on what we were going to name kids. I listened to everyone what they were going to get named when Erla'd go up and bless you. I usually found out what we were going to name him. But Erla was named for he was born on Grandpa Beck's birthday. And he was named for Grandpa Beck and for Earl. And
Earl Antrim.
Grandpa Beck's name was Antrim. And Earl's name was Earl Antrim. And that was a family name. I believe it was Grandpa Beck's grandmother was Antrim, Hannah Antrim. Mm-hmm. And so it really was an ancestral name. But Earl didn't like Antrim. So when Earl was born, when Erle was born on Grandpa Beck's birthday, well, there was nothing doing. When he was the first grandson in the family, but everybody in the family said, no, he's got to be named Earl Antrim. And Earl didn't like Antrim, and he says, I'm not going to name that kid Antrim. So when he went to bless him, he just named him Earl with the A. And so actually his name wasn't Antrim.
But the A stands for the Antrim.
The A stands for Antrim. Mm-hmm. Well, was that enough on birthdays? I guess.
Well, you might as well tell us about Gwen. How did she get hers?
Well,
Gwen isn't in the picture yet, but tell us about her name while you're telling about names.
I don't know. Gwen was kind of well, when we lived up on the farm, we had, Gwen Adams used to work for us sometimes.
Yeah.
And she was a real sweet girl. We both liked her. And my cousin Cecil had a girl named Gwen. And one or two others in the family had been named Gwen. But nobody stopped to think how short and what?
Melodic.
And melodic. Gwen Beck was real shocking.
Well, Ruth Beck's the same way.
Well, you were Ruth Eileen.
But I didn't ever go by. You didn't ever call me Ruth Eileen once in a while.
No, we never called you Ruth Eileen. It just, but it was, so when, I've always felt badly about Gwen's. We call her Gwendy and Gwendolyn and anything, but just it's usually Gwenny now. But it's because her name was so short that it sounded bad. Well, is that enough?
It really didn't.
Huh?
It really didn't.
It didn't. It wasn't melodic. But Pap, and yet we gave you and Gwenny both names. But I remember Pap's argument when we didn't call him Pap then either. We called him Earl. His argument when we named Gwen was that when she got married, she'd have 3 names. And so he said he thought it was better, although he'd named 2 girls with middle names, he said he thought it was better for the girls to just have 1 name. So that's how come she just got Gwen Beck.
Now, you said your cousin Cecil had a Gwen.
Yes.
Isn't that the Gwen that got hit with the automobile in Salt Lake? That I gave the little dolly to?
Yes. And she's the one that always calls me or called me when Cecil was in trouble or came over.
Oh.
She felt it was kind of a special kinship because we named one of our girls after her. So she felt a special kinship there. Well, flip it a minute now. While we were still up on the farm, Earl transferred from the high school. The high school was getting real hard on Earl. He'd work, he'd go early in the morning, and he usually have a practice at noon. Hardly ever got to have his noon hour with him whenever anybody else did. And then he always had a practice after, either band or orchestra or he put on an opera.
Or an opera or something.
Yeah, he put on an operetta every year that he was there. And so it was really hard on him. But while we're on talking about the operettas, you kids, I told you about taking Ilene to the dances with us. Well, I don't think I ever paid a babysitter, hardly ever. When we went to a show or anything, because we started taking Ilene to picture shows and wherever we were going at night, and he just thoroughly enjoyed that kind of thing. So when he was about 4 or 5 years old, Earl put on the Gypsy Rover. And you remember that cute little costume that with the white suit, with white satin suit with the gold braid on it and gold braid on his cap.
Yeah.
And Earl was, there was a couple of characters in Gypsy Rover. One was sinful and one was mortal. Now, I don't know I can't remember what part that Ilene had in it, but he had this cute little costume. And he used to go around and sing. He could sing and repeat nearly every part in the play, in the operettas, whenever he was putting them on, because he went down and watched them so much.
He was down to practices.
And so that was that little opera, that little suit. I kept it for Ilene for a souvenir for a long time. I don't know where it is now, but they were fun days.
Yeah, I remember when I started the school, and it was such a long ways to walk from up on the hill. And I'd come down and tap on the window. We used to call it the Little Theater then, because there was a stage in the music room. And I'd tap on the back window, and somebody'd come let me in, and I'd crawl in the window and sit back there in the stage and sit and color. I always had something good to eat, because the school kids would bring me bananas and orange or piece of candy or something.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd sit back there and color, or else just sit and play with something till Pap got ready to go home at night, ride home with him, rather than have to walk back home all alone, because don't remember, there were 2 or 3 of us that came down, but then Ilene and Erlene Loader and I were the only 3 girls up there, and then they left at Loader Lane, and I had to go the rest of the way by myself, so.
Yeah, that was one reason that, while we were still up to while we were still up on the farm, though, I better tell you about how when we all got the flu, and Erle got the flu. Erle took it first, and then Ruth and Pearl and Gwen, all of them got sick, and I thought, I can't get this. The Lord will take care of me, because if the mother does the best she can to take care of her kids, the Lord will take care of me. Well, I don't mean to be tempting the Lord, but I got the flu, and Earl had Erle had I don't know which to call him, Earl or Erle, because it was so confusing all our lives. But we called him Erle when he was little.
Yeah, you differentiated calling him Erle.
Mm-hmm. And he got infection in his ears, and they gathered and broke. And then you got real sick, and it was about 6 weeks that we just really had a bad time. And so then we were just starting to get on the mend, and I went down, and I was quite weak, and I got arthritis, and I couldn't straighten out for 2 or 3. It was nearly a week that I couldn't straighten out. Then after that cleared up, I was run down. I just didn't feel a bit good. It was real run down and looked awful. I didn't have any energy or anything. Part of the time I was still sick. So about that time, I don't know that I ought to say this. So flip it a minute. Haven't I told you that, we've been talking about Gwen's name.
Yeah, we talked about Gwen's name, but we haven't born Gwen yet. Sorry, Gwenny.
Sorry, Gwenny. Gwenny was the only one in our family that wasn't born at my mother's home. And she was born up in the,
she was born in a basket.
She lived
out in the tree.
She lived in a basket and hung out in a tree while I worked, but she was born in our little home up on Locust Avenue, the 15th of December, 1934. And she, that was the wildest day that I can't ever remember a worse storm than we had then. And Earl hired Mrs. Bjork for a nurse to take care of me, and she came to the house and stayed. He went and got her when I was in labor. He went and got her out in Manila, and then he went for the doctor, and that was the wildest storm. I think it was thundering and lightning and hail, and then the wind was just howling. And I was just scared silly for Earl to be gone, to go out getting the doctor and getting the nurse. And it was in the night. So anyway, he got back home safely with the nurse and with Dr. Anderson. And Dr. Anderson stayed there. He didn't want to go out again. He stayed there until everything was all over. And Gwenny was born about 7 o'clock in the morning. And when she was born, when she delivered, she had the cord wrapped around her neck. And I don't know. I don't know how how long it would have held that way, or I mean how much longer I could have been in labor before she'd have been in trouble. But the doctor said we got her just right, because she would have been choking to death before long. But anyway, that was.
I didn't ever know that before.
You didn't?
Mm-mm. No, but I remember how sick you were.
Well, I was. I just stayed right there, and Gwenny was born the 15th of December, and for Christmas Eve, or for Christmas Day, they moved my bed
Out into the living room.
out into the living room where I could enjoy the family, and Mrs. Bjork stayed with us.
And that was the neatest Christmas we ever had.
Yeah.
I've told my kids, but I remember so well that you were so sick, and I wasn't old enough to really realize all of what was going on, but I realized you were so sick that we nearly lost you then.
Well,
And that was the neatest Christmas present that we could ever have had, was for them to move your bed out into the living room, because then we knew you were getting better, and that was the funnest, or not exactly the funnest, but that was the most special Christmas I ever remembered. I remember we really thought that was pretty neat.
well, it wasn't. You see, she was born, and then we started having. Early had all of this trouble with his ears, and we had colds and stuff, and when I was 34, she was born. She was born in 1934. I would have been 32, and I was sick. I was sick nearly off and on after that for over a year, quite a little bit over a year. And one day, Earl was going down to the Vineyard School then, and he had all of you kids with him.
Oh, you didn't have Gwenny?
We didn't have Gwen, but he had, and he didn't have Pearl, but he had you and Ilene.
No, Earl didn't go to Vineyard.
Well, you were going to school.
Earl went, yeah.
You were going to school. I don't know where Pearl was. It seems to me like he took Pearl.
Pearl probably went with.
He took Pearl and
Yeah, Pearl would be kindergarten.
well, he took her down. He took Pearl to school with me, and I guess I still had Gwen home.
Now, Pearl would be in kindergarten, so she went half a day, and then they'd let her
And then
stay there.
They just let her stay down there.
She probably took kindergarten double session, morning and afternoon.
She probably did. But
Well, that's all right. Gwen had to take kindergarten twice.
there was Joy Clegg asked Pap how his wife was. He says, "How's Eileen?" And Earl said, "I'm quite worried about her." He said, "She isn't getting better." And he said, "She didn't feel a bit good when I left this morning." So for some reason, and I'll never know why, there was an old doctor that Joy Clegg went fishing with. And this old guy Joy had talked to that doctor that morning, and he told him he was going over to Pleasant Grove, and he says, why don't you go up around by Earl Beck's and see how his wife is? Because he said she was quite sick, and she's up there alone. And I can't remember the old guy's name, the old doctor's name. But anyway, he knocked on the door, and I heard him knock. And I think I said, come in. But I was too far gone to get up and answer the door or get up at all. So he just pushed the door open and came on back in, came back in the bedroom, and he said, he took one look at me, and he went back out to his car, and he got a vibrator that he had a vibrator and some medication. He had his medical kit along with him. But he ran that vibrator up and down the limbs, and I can remember now, because I had that same sinking feeling when I had that heart attack. I can remember that I was far enough gone that I wasn't worrying whether I came to or not.
Mm-hmm.
And I had Gwenny there alone without anyone to take care of her. But he ran that vibrator up and down my back and on my limbs until he got me circulating and coming around a little bit, and then he gave me something to stimulate me. I don't know what it was, whether he made some tea or whether he had a medication in his. But anyway, he stayed there most of the morning and worked on me and brought me back. So that I could have just gone right on out and nobody had ever been the wiser.
Gee.
But
No wonder we always liked Joy Clegg.
well, Joy
was a good old guy. He was fun.
He kind of claimed, he always said, well, I saved your life. He said, if I hadn't...
So I'm responsible for you, huh?
Yeah, if I hadn't sent the doctor, and he wasn't a doctor that, he wasn't a popular practitioner.
Mm-hmm.
He was just, he might even have been a horse doctor, I don't know. But anyway.
Whatever, he did the right thing.
Yeah, he did the right things. And I'm sure he stayed there most of the day until Earl got home, and he got me, brought me back around. And when Earl called Mother and told her that what had happened and how sick I was, she had me come over to her place, and I stayed over to her place for 2 or 3 days till I got feeling better, and then I came back home.
And then you went up to Salt Lake to that doctor, didn't you?
Well,
Right shortly after that.
yeah, it was after that. It was when I was down in Geneva. Dr. Anderson. Well, I'm not going to tell you about that. So.
You're not, huh?
Mm-mm.
Okay, go back to up on the farm now. And I remember Earl and I always used to herd the cows.
You used what?
Used to herd the cows up along the ditch bank and up around. Sometimes we'd take them out of the pasture, and I guess we took them to pasture, and then we'd bring them back, and sometimes we just herd them along the side of the road.
Well, I don't know. We always had a cow,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know I don't think we had more than one, but I remember too. I remember staking the cow out along the road up in there. But when we lived up on the farm, we always had the cow, and we always had pigs and chickens, and even though it was the deepest of depression, see the depression. You kids were all born in the depression years.
It was starting to pull out of it, though.
Yeah, it was. But when we lived up on the farm,
but things were tough for you then. Things were tough for you.
Things were tough, yes.
But the worst of the depression was past.
But there was a lot of people around Pleasant Grove and people up around the avenue and like that they had their they had the animals, and they had meat. We always had milk and butter and things like that. But there was one or two people that I know used to depend on us for milk. We used to take milk down to that one lady whenever our cow was fresh. We always took milk down to her, and so.
I remember herding those cows up by those rock piles.
Do you?
And I hated those rock piles because there were so many.
There was no place to sit down.
No, there were snakes up in there.
Oh, is that right?
And one day when I was herding the cows up, and I wasn't up to the curve where it curved around. Then there was that great big rock pile on the curve.
Yeah, I know how you mean.
And I wasn't up that far. And there was a big snake crawled across the road in front of me, and I had a little iron rod in my hand that I was just playing with. I threw that at the snake and ran home. Earl had to go get the cow. I wouldn't go back. I must have been a chicken.
Well, I remember that, and I said, no, you don't have to go back.
No, but there were a lot of snakes and spiders in those big rock piles.
Well, there was
so I stayed away from those pretty much.
There was up on the farm. I was always worried for fear one of you get bit by a black widow spider when we were up in the fruit trees and in the strawberries and like that. I was always afraid of a black widow spider.
Do you remember one night that I got up and went to the bathroom and there was a great big tarantula in the bathroom?
Yeah. And I don't know where that came from or what we did about it.
Well, Pappy got it. He killed it. But my goodness, that was as big around as a bottle.
Good night.
And scared, boy, I'll bet I killed it just with my scream. But Pappy took care of it. I'm sure he killed it. But I look back now and I enjoyed being up there, and yet I think I was pretty glad to move away from the farm.
Well,
Remember, the winters were so cold.
It wasn't really a good thing for you because you were too small to walk, and it was too far to ride your bicycle.
And the school was tough because we walked in the winter.
Yeah.
And there was snow all winter long.
Nobody ever thought of busing kids then.
No, and we walked, and me and all those boys, and they teased the socks off from me back there. And when I rode my little bicycle, I remember, and Dad had told me I couldn't let kids ride that bicycle. And yet those boys all up along Locust Avenue would chase me, and I'd ride just as hard and fast as I could, but sometimes with some of them a block ahead, stationed ahead.
Did they ever take?
Oh yeah, they caught me once and grabbed onto the bike and were going to take it away from me and go for a ride, and they got hold of the bike and I wrecked. And I really wrecked good. Yeah, I hurt me,
my,
Yeah, you look fine. But I wrecked, and I bent the wheel on the bicycle, and I fell on it, and I hurt me bad, and then the wheels were so bent I couldn't hardly move it, and so in straightening the wheels and the spokes I cut my hands all up, and I finally got it on home just sobbing. And I don't remember the boys ever chasing me after that. But I felt so bad that I'd wrecked that cute little red bicycle. I didn't care about me being all cut to pieces.
Can you turn that off for a minute? No, this is going to...
Hey, you kid, she wants me to go back and redo it because she thinks she got a burp in there. Now that is just part of life, right?
No, we cut it out.
No, they all know you're...
Did you cut that off or didn't you?
Sure, I cut it off.
Well, but I mean, play it back for a minute.
No, it's going now.
Oh, come on.
No, it's going.
Play it back. I want you to cut that off for a little.
No, I'm not going to cut it off.
I'm not going to do any more.
You are.
I'm not going to take any more.
No, now keep going.
I've lost my thoughts. You've got to turn this off. We don't want to waste tape like this.
Yes, the kids, you got to get in your normal cutting up mood now, Mother. Oh, maybe you better get up and do us a dance.
I better turn that off.
All right, go on back to, we were talking about how cold it was. And I remember walking that, what was it, about a mile and a half?
Yeah, it's better than, maybe it was a mile and a half, maybe a little bit more.
Yeah, at least a mile and a half.
That you had to walk to school.
Uh-huh. And there was always snow on the ground, wasn't there, during the winter?
It seems like we'd have snow from early, in the middle of October till spring.
I remember a foot of snow up there most of the time, and my toes got frostbitten. My toes still itch sometimes in the winter time because they got frostbitten so good walking back and forth. But that's why they let us go to the vineyard, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, we'd been up we lived up on the farm 5 or 6 years. I don't. It might have been 7. And in 1936, Earl was called to be principal of it was a vineyard school then.
Yeah.
But
they didn't change it to Union until after I left.
Oh, didn't they? Well, it was.
I think the year after I left.
Oh, well, it was the vineyard school, and Earl went down there as principal because he felt like he was, if he'd have stayed working as hard as he was in the high school, he was starting to get an ulcer, and we got worried for sure. His health wouldn't hold up under the way he was working, so he went down there as principal, and he was quite happy to go. It was a small school, but he was principal, and he felt a lot more free to do what he wanted.
He taught 4th and 5th grade down there as well as being principal.
He taught
5th and 6th. Yeah, 5th and 6th.
He didn't teach. Didn't he have a 5th grade teacher?
He taught me both 5th and 6th.
He did?
Now maybe the first year there was a 5th grade teacher.
Oh.
But with my class, I had him 5th and 6th, and we were a combined class.
So Ruth was 3 years old when...
No, I was in the 3rd grade.
Yeah, in the 3rd grade. And when when Earl took over the principalship down there.
And Pearlie was just, she would be kindergarten.
Pearl would be kindergarten.
Yeah.
Yeah, Pearl would be in the kindergarten. And Earl was down here in junior high. He never did go down to Vineyard to school. But Earl used to take the kids to school with him. And
I don't know what you did with Gwenny again. Well, you were home there for a while.
Yes, I was home. I kept Gwenny with me until she was 6 and able to go down to school. But after I'd had that real hard sick spell, and when I had another sick spell about 6 months after that, and they thought I should have an operation. So when I had the operation, I just was real sick, and the doctor said the form was too hard on me. He said, you've got two choices: either give up the form or get something, don't do as much as you're doing on it. Because he said, you'll be pushing daisies the first thing you know, and you'll just be part of that form. So that was in it was about 1936, 37. Well, Pap went down there in 36. And then in 1937, we traded, well, a year before that, before we traded that farm, I felt like I needed to do something to help out, because Ruth said it wasn't as bad, as hard on us as well, some people, because
the depression had eased, but it was still tough times.
But it was pretty tough going, and though Earl never was out of work, he was never out of work the day after, from the day we were married, or from before we were married until after he retired.
He still wasn't out of work then.
No, he's never been out of work all his life. But I'd always been active, and during the summers during the summer that Earl went to, after Gwen, that was after Pearl was born. I went down and worked in the commercial bank and the next year that I worked in the commercial bank both times that Earl was when he went to summer school. He went to Seattle to summer school.
Mm-hmm.
And then he spent another summer, and I don't remember. It seemed to me like he was in Seattle both times. But anyway, he was gone nearly all summer, and that was when Earl was still little. He was only about 3 years old then. I worked in the commercial bank, Provo Commercial.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went after I got feeling better, a little bit better, I felt like I had to do something to help out, because we were in quite close straits, and I felt like if I could get a job that I could help out, and it wouldn't be as hard on either one of us. So Elton Sumner was selling, that's Sandra's husband, was selling New York Life insurance, and he said, why don't you sell life insurance? Well, that sounded all right to me, so I went with Elton, and there were a half a dozen people that were taking the training, and Sterling W. Sill was head of the New York Life then. Sterling W. Sill taught the classes that I took, and I graduated from his New York Life classes, and I got a license to sell New York Life, and so, but we were living down in we sold the farm, and I'm getting ahead of myself. We went down, but before we went in the garage, I sold New York Life for about a year and a half.
Okay, then we hadn't sold the house.
Hmm?
We were still up on the farm then.
No, we'd moved down, so we sold the farm. We traded our equity in the farm.
Yeah, tell us about your trade into the car business. I thought that was interesting.
Well, that's what I'm starting to tell you now. When I first went in the car business,
Uh-huh.
that's what I'm starting to say. Yeah, but that was before I started selling New York Life. When the doctor told me I needed to move off from the farm and that it was too hard on us, Leo Harvey and Bert Page had a Ford dealership down in Trouble, right on, or in Pleasant Grove, just on Main Street, and so Earl and I traded the equity we had in the farm, and then we put about $1,500 cash and paid off some of the water assessments and some of the things that they needed some extra cash in the motor company, and we traded.
So you took on those liabilities to pay them off?
Yeah.
Yeah, as part of your down payment.
Yeah, well, that was part of our payment, and we joined. Bert took over our farm, the fruit farm, and we took over his interest in the motor company. And Earl was, Leo was president, and Earl was vice president, and I was secretary and treasurer and bookkeeper. And we moved down. So when we sold the farm, we moved down in that old place of Jimmy D. Thorne's. It was a big old red brick home that had been, it's one of the first places, I guess, built in Pleasant Grove. And it's where the Bank of Pleasant Grove, or now the Deseret Bank, that's where it used to, that property and another property that was owned by another guy, Allen.
That's where the bank is now.
Yeah, they bought that old property out, and that's where the present bank stands. But we lived in that old house then from 1937 when we brought into the motor company with Leo, and so we were living in that old Jimmy D. Thorne home. And Earl still went down to school. He went to school all the time, but instead of, well, while we were still up on the farm, he started taking you kids to school down there.